The capsule hummed against its magnetic restraints like something alive and angry. Dr. Emily Chen pressed her palm to the reinforced glass, felt the vibration travel up her arm, and wondered if she was about to destroy the world or save it. 58 minutes until launch. The countdown display bathed the underground laboratory in crimson light, each second ticking away with the weight of decades. Marcus wheeled his chair back from the console, rubbing his eyes beneath wire-rimmed glasses that had seen too many all-nighters. Telemetry's green across the board. Quantum field generators stable at 97%, he reported, then paused, fingers drumming against his thigh in that nervous pattern Emily had learned to recognize over 3 years of working together. "We're really doing this. We're fixing this," Emily corrected, though the distinction felt thinner with each passing second. Through the observation window, the capsule sat in its launch chamber like a chrome egg, waiting to hatch backwards through time. Inside, sealed behind layers of titanium and temporal shielding, was everything they needed to change. 1950. Industrial specs for carbon-neutral technology. Solar panel schematics that would have seemed like magic to Eisenhower's America. A carefully crafted letter explaining the climate data, signed by 17 Nobel laureates who didn't know Emily had forged their signatures because they wouldn't be born for another 20 years. Sarah Chen Okafor emerged from the archive room carrying a banker's box, her usually immaculate lab coat now dusty from searching through old files. Emily's younger sister by 6 years, but older by worry lines. Sarah had the kind of face that suggested she'd seen the math behind reality and hadn't liked the equations. "Em, you need to see this. Now," she said urgently. "Can it wait?" Emily asked without turning from the window. The capsule's surface rippled with quantum interference patterns, beautiful and terrible. "We're in final countdown procedures." "It's about the launch," Sarah said, her voice carrying that specific frequency of barely controlled panic that made Emily's stomach clench. "The declassified files from Project Blue Book, the ones the DoD released last month. I was doing a final historical sweep to make sure we weren't sending the capsule to a location where it might be—" "Sarah," Emily interrupted, finally turning, impatience bleeding through. They'd been over this. Every variable checked, every possibility calculated. "Whatever it is," Sarah pulled out a photograph and held it up. The image was grainy, black and white, edges yellowed with age. But the object in the center was unmistakable. Their capsule, half buried in New Jersey clay, surrounded by men in fedoras and military uniforms. The date stamp read, October 15th, 1950. Emily's hand moved to her throat, fingers finding the small scar there from a childhood accident. A habit when her brain needed something to do while processing the impossible. That can't be," she whispered. "Look closer," Sarah said, her hand trembling as she pointed to a figure standing beside the capsule. A man in a dark suit held up a piece of paper to the camera. Even through 7 decades of photographic degradation, Emily recognized her own handwriting. The lab's fluorescent light suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. Marcus had rolled his chair over, peering at the photo over Emily's shoulder. His breath smelled like the terrible coffee from the vending machine 3 floors up. "What does it say?" he asked. Emily squinted at the message. The words swam into focus like a migraine aura reversing itself. "Don't send the capsule. Attempting to change the past made the future worse. You've already made the mistake," she read aloud. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, pushing back from them both, his chair wheels squeaking against the polished concrete. "That's your handwriting." "I know what my handwriting looks like," Emily snapped, her voice coming out sharper than intended. She turned the photo over, looking for something, anything that would make this make sense. On the back, in faded pencil, "Recovered object, Site 47B. Contents classified under Executive Order 9835. Project lead, Dr. Harrison Whitmore." Sarah was already at her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The clicks echoed in the suddenly quiet lab. Even the capsule's hum seemed to have diminished, as if it too was holding its breath. Harrison Whitmore, physicist, worked on the Manhattan Project, then disappeared from public records in 1951, she reported, looking up, her dark eyes reflecting the countdown display. Right after this photo was taken, 49 minutes. Dr. James Okonkwo chose that moment to enter through the security doors, carrying a tablet and wearing that expression of forced calm that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong with the math. James was 6'4" and moved like a man who'd learned to be careful in spaces built for smaller people. His doctoral thesis on temporal mechanics had been so far ahead of its time that MIT needed to bring in external reviewers just to understand it. "We have a problem with the containment field," he announced. "Get in line," Emily said dryly, handing him the photograph. James studied it for exactly 3 seconds before his carefully maintained composure cracked. "This is our capsule," he said, his voice tight. "In 1950, Marcus confirmed, having started pacing, a habit that drove Emily crazy on normal days. Today wasn't normal, which means we already sent it, which means we're going to send it, which means—" "Bootstrap paradox," James said, setting down his tablet with deliberate care, as if sudden movements might shatter causality further. "The capsule exists in 1950 because we send it back. We send it back because we have to maintain the timeline." Emily stared at the countdown. 47 minutes. The numbers blurred, doubled, snapped back into focus. "The message says not to send it. Says it made things worse," she said quietly. "The message you wrote," Sarah whispered. "That you're going to write. That I apparently already wrote," Emily said, pressing her palms against her eyes until she saw phosphonies. "God, I hate temporal mechanics. You invented half of them," Marcus pointed out, unhelpfully. The capsule's hum had definitely changed now, dropping an octave. Through the observation window, Emily could see frost beginning to form on its surface despite the climate-controlled environment. The quantum field was already partially engaged, preparing to punch a hole through space-time in 45 minutes. James pulled up schematics on his tablet, his fingers steady, despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "The launch sequence is automated. Once we passed the 1-hour mark, the system locked us out. Security protocol to prevent last-minute sabotage or cold feet," he explained. "Can we cut power?" Sarah asked, already moving toward the electrical panels. "Backup generators would kick in. The whole system's designed to be unstoppable once initiated," James said, swiping through screen after screen of code. "We built it too well." Emily laughed, sharp and bitter. "We built it to save the world. Made sure nothing could stop us, not even ourselves." The photograph lay on the console between them, that impossible image from 1950. Emily picked it up again, studying her own handwriting from a future that had already become the past. The man holding the message had kind eyes behind round spectacles. He looked tired. They all looked tired, those men gathered around the capsule in their dark suits and thin ties, as if they'd been waiting for something that finally arrived, but brought no relief. "There's more," Sarah said, having pulled another document from the box. "A transcript from an interview with someone at the site." She read aloud, her voice flat with shock. "Subject claimed to be from the year 2017, insisted we needed to prevent something called climate change. Kept saying she'd made a mistake, that changing the past had caused a cascade failure. Subject was detained for psychiatric evaluation, released after 3 weeks when she stopped making claims about the future." "She?" Emily asked, her mouth going dry. Sarah nodded slowly. "Dr. Whitmore's notes mention a woman, early 30s, Asian features, found unconscious near the capsule site." She looked up at her sister. "Em, I think you didn't just send the capsule back. I think you went with it." The laboratory's ventilation system kicked on with a mechanical sigh, stirring papers on the cluttered desks. Emily felt the cool air against her skin but couldn't shake the chill that had nothing to do with temperature. 39 minutes. "That's impossible," she said automatically, a reflex born from years of scientific training. "The capsule isn't designed for human transport. The quantum field would—" "Would what?" Marcus interrupted, having stopped pacing to stand with his arms crossed, that defensive posture he adopted when the universe stopped making sense. Tear someone apart? Kill them instantly? Because apparently it didn't. James was running calculations on his tablet, his long fingers moving with surgical precision. If someone were inside during transport, shielded by the capsule's interior field matrix, he trailed off, lost in mathematics that Emily could see reflected in his eyes like a language only they spoke. The power requirements would triple. We'd need the backup generators, Emily finished. If we activated them all simultaneously, diverted everything through the primary field generator. She moved to the console, her hands already reaching for the keyboard before she stopped herself. What was she doing? Planning to send herself back in time because apparently she already had? Sarah grabbed her wrist. Stop. Think about this. That woman in 1950. If it was you, she tried to warn us, tried to stop this, she pleaded. Or maybe she caused it, Emily said, pulling free, her sister's touch leaving ghost heat on her skin. Maybe by going back, by trying to change things, she created the very future we're living in. Climate disasters, mass extinctions, everything we're trying to prevent. Schrodinger's guilt complex, Marcus muttered. You're blaming yourself for something you haven't even done yet. The countdown hit 35 minutes. The capsule's hum had become a song, harmonics building on each other like a chord progression written in the key of paradox. Frost had spread across the entire observation window now, and Emily could see her breath misting in the suddenly cold air. The field's expanding, James announced, unnecessary since they could all feel it. That distinctive wrongness that preceded temporal displacement, like the moment before lightning strikes when all the hair on your body stands up. It's drawing more power than projected. Emily moved back to the photograph, studying it with the intensity she usually reserved for particle collision data. The capsule in the image had scoring along its sides, marks that their current capsule didn't have. Yet, look at the damage patterns. Here and here, she said, pointing to dark streaks across the metal. That's from atmospheric re-entry. Re-entry? Sarah asked, leaning closer, her perfume something floral that she'd worn since college mixing with the ozone smell from the growing quantum field. But it's supposed to materialize at ground level. Unless something goes wrong, Emily said, her mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Unless the targeting is off, and it appears in the upper atmosphere, or unless... She stopped, the thought too terrible to voice. Unless what? Marcus prompted. Unless it doesn't go back to 1950 at all, unless it goes somewhere else first. Someone else, Emily said, turning to James. Pull up the field harmonics from the last 3 test runs. James's fingers flew across his tablet. The data appeared on the main screen, waves of blue and green that looked almost peaceful, until you understood what they represented. There's a variance in the tertiary frequency. It's been growing with each test, he reported. How much variance? Emily asked sharply. 0.003%, James answered. Marcus laughed without humor. That's nothing. That's within the margin of... That's 70 years of drift, Emily interrupted. Multiply that variance by the power we're using, factor in the Earth's movement through space, and we could be off by decades. Centuries, maybe. The capsule shuddered in its restraints. Through the frost-covered window, Emily could see electricity arcing across its surface, beautiful and terrifying. The countdown showed 30 minutes. Sarah had gone pale, her freckles standing out like constellations against shocked skin. So when whoever went back, they might have arrived at the wrong time entirely, she asked. Or the right time, James said, setting his tablet down carefully, as if it might explode. Think about it. If someone went back and failed to change anything significant, if they just created a stable loop where the past always included their arrival, then we're not changing history, Emily finished. We're fulfilling it. The lights flickered. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in amber that made them all look like they were already viewing each other through the sepia of old photographs. The capsule's song had become a scream, harmonics building towards something that felt like inevitability. "There's a manual override," Emily said quietly, but her words cut through the electrical chaos. "In the launch chamber itself. The chamber that's currently flooded with exotic particles and enough radiation to cook a turkey?" Marcus asked, his sarcasm unable to quite hide his fear. "That chamber?" Emily was already moving toward the reinforced door that led to the launch chamber. "The radiation suits are rated for normal operations," James said, catching her arm, his grip firm but gentle. "Not for quantum field exposure at these levels. You go in there now, you might have 10 minutes before cellular damage becomes irreversible." 10 minutes is all I need," Emily said with determination. "To do what?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. "Stop the launch and potentially unravel whatever timeline we're in? Or let it proceed and accept that we're trapped in this loop forever?" Emily looked at her sister, at Marcus with his nervous finger drumming, at James with his careful logic and steady hands. Her team, her friends, the people she'd convinced to help her save the world, or destroy it, or maybe both simultaneously. 25 minutes. The photograph on the console seemed to pulse with its own light, though that was probably just the emergency lighting playing tricks. The woman found near the capsule in 1950. Asian features. Early 30s. In 1950, Emily would have been negative 18 years old. But if she went back now, in 2017, at 38, and spent 6 years in the past before they found her. "I need to see the rest of the files," Emily said. "Everything from Project Blue Book about the capsule recovery." Sarah was already pulling papers from the box, her hands shaking. "Most of it's redacted, but there are medical reports. The woman they found, she had a scar on her throat. Childhood accident, they noted," she read. Emily's hand went involuntarily to her own throat, to the thin line of scar tissue she'd carried since she was 7. A fall from her bike. 6 stitches. Her mother crying in the emergency room. She knew things. Sarah continued reading. Specific dates. The Korean War. Sputnik. Kennedy's assassination. They thought she was insane until some of her predictions started coming true. "Did she try to change anything?" Emily asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. She tried to talk to scientists. Oppenheimer, apparently. Einstein. But no one would listen to a woman claiming to be from the future. They medicated her, institutionalized her for a while, Sarah said, her voice dropping. She died in 1956. Heart failure, the records say. But there's a note from the attending physician. He wrote that she seemed relieved at the end, like she was finally escaping something. The capsule's scream had become almost musical now, a symphony of wrongness that made Emily's teeth ache. 20 minutes. Marcus slammed his hand on the console, making everyone jump. "This is insane. We're talking about this like it's already happened, like we have no choice," he said heatedly. "Do we?" Emily asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, heavy as the exotic particles that were slowly flooding the launch chamber. Through the observation window, the capsule had begun to glow, a soft blue light that pulsed in time with Emily's heartbeat. James had moved to the secondary console, pulling up environmental readings that made him whistle low. "The radiation levels in the chamber are approaching the suit's maximum tolerance. We have maybe 15 minutes before even attempting entry becomes impossible," he said. "Then we have 15 minutes to decide," Emily said, though the decision felt like it had been made decades ago by a version of herself who'd already lived through this moment. Sarah held up another document, her voice strange. "There's something else. The capsule in 1950, they opened it, found all our materials inside. The schematics, the climate data, everything," she said, then looked up. "But there was additional content, files we didn't include." "What kind of files?" Emily asked. "Personal effects. A journal. Handwritten," Sarah said, her eyes meeting Emily's. "Your handwriting, describing events from 1950 to 1956, including," she swallowed hard, "including detailed accounts of watching the world not change despite having all the information, watching the same mistakes happen, the same disasters unfold." Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. So even with future knowledge, nothing changed? All this work, this whole project pointless? He said. Not pointless, James said quietly, studying his tablet. Necessary. The capsule appeared in 1950 because we send it. If we don't send it... Grandfather paradox, Emily finished. If we don't send it, then it was never found, which means we never saw these warnings, which means we would send it, which means we're screwed either way, Marcus said, his drumming having become almost violent. Send it and complete the loop, or don't send it and tear reality apart. 17 minutes. The capsule's glow had intensified, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Emily watched her shadow self on the wall, distorted and strange, and wondered if that's what temporal displacement felt like, becoming a twisted version of yourself, stretched across possibilities. There's a third option, she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. The emergency lighting made their faces look like old photographs already, sepia-toned ghosts of themselves. We send the capsule, but empty, Emily said, moving to the console, her fingers hovering over keys she knew she wasn't going to press. Remove all the materials. Complete the mechanical loop, but break the information loop. That could work, James said slowly, running calculations in his head. The capsule would still appear in 1950, maintaining that part of history. But without the contents, nothing changes in the past, Sarah said, her eyes widening with hope. No failed attempt to alter history, no version of you trapped in the wrong decade. But also no explanation for the warning message, Marcus pointed out. If the capsule arrives empty, who writes the note? Who tells them not to send it? Emily stared at the photograph again. The man holding her handwritten warning looked directly at the camera, as if he could see through time to this exact moment. Behind him, partially visible, was a woman in a dark dress. The image was too blurry to make out her features clearly, but something about her posture, the way she held her shoulders. The journal, Emily said suddenly. Sarah, the journal found in the capsule. Does it mention anything about multiple attempts? Multiple versions? Sarah shuffled through papers, scanning rapidly. Yes. Here. This is my third attempt to prevent the loop. Each time I think I understand, but the universe has a way of course-correcting. Perhaps that's the lesson. Perhaps the point isn't to change the past, but to... She stopped reading, her face pale. To what? James prompted. To accept that some mistakes are meant to be made, that trying to fix the past only perpetuates the damage. The real work isn't in prevention, but in healing what's already broken. Sarah read, her voice cracking on the last words. 12 minutes. The capsule's glow had become painful to look at directly. The frost on the window was melting now, running down in streams that looked like tears. The quantum field was approaching critical mass, the point where it would either stabilize into a temporal bridge or collapse, taking half of New Jersey with it. Emily made her decision. She moved to the radiation suit locker, pulling out the heavy protective gear. The suit smelled like rubber and fear sweat from the last time they'd had a containment breach. I'm going in, she announced. No, Sarah said, grabbing her arm. The radiation levels will give me approximately 8 minutes of safe exposure, Emily said, shrugging into the suit with practiced efficiency. Enough time to either abort the launch or... She paused, sealing the helmet. Or ensure it happens exactly as it's supposed to. You don't even know what that means, Marcus protested. No, Emily agreed, her voice muffled by the helmet's speaker. But apparently I figure it out. Have figured it out. Will figure it out. She laughed, the sound tinny through the suit's audio system. God, I really do hate temporal mechanics. She moved toward the chamber door, but James stepped in her path. If you go in there and something happens, if you get caught in the field, he said, then I end up in 1950, writing messages to myself that I'm currently ignoring, Emily said, meeting his eyes through the helmet's visor. Or I stop this whole thing and we find out what happens when you break a stable time loop. Emily, Sarah said, her voice small and scared, what if the message is right? What if trying to change things makes it worse? Emily looked at her sister, at her team, at the countdown that now showed 8 minutes. Then we deal with worse. We always have. That's what humans do. We make mistakes and then we fix them, or try to, even when the fixing breaks things further. She opened the chamber door. The heat hit her first, despite the suit's cooling system. The air itself seemed to burn, charged with particles that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime. The capsule hung in its magnetic cradle, no longer chrome but something between matter and light, a possibility made almost real. The manual override panel was on the far wall, 20 meters through a storm of quantum probability. Emily could see herself reaching it in some timelines, falling short in others, all the possibilities superimposed like double-exposed film. She took a step forward. The radiation meter on her wrist began its countdown. 8 minutes. 7 minutes, 50 seconds. Another step. The capsule's song was deafening here, not heard but felt, vibrating through her bones. She could taste metal and ozone and something else, something that reminded her of childhood summers in New Jersey, playing in the backyard while her grandmother hung laundry, the smell of grass and time passing. 7 minutes. Halfway to the override panel, Emily stopped. Through the chaos of the quantum field, she could see something impossible. The capsule was already opening, had been open all along, would be open. Inside was nothing. The capsule was empty. No climate data, no schematics, no carefully forged letter from future Nobel laureates. Just vacant space, waiting to be filled or left hollow. 6 minutes. Emily understood then, with the clarity that comes from standing at the intersection of possibility and necessity. The capsule had always been empty when it arrived in 1950. The materials found inside they hadn't come from 2017. They'd been added later by someone who'd arrived separately, someone who'd had 6 years to gather documents, to write journals, to try and fail to change a past that wouldn't listen. The override panel was within reach now. She could abort the launch, prevent the capsule from traveling back. But that would break the loop, and breaking the loop would what? Destroy causality, or free them from it. 5 minutes. The radiation meter's alarm was screaming now, matching the capsule's quantum song. Emily's hand hovered over the abort button. In her peripheral vision, she could see her shadow selves, all the versions of Emily Chen who'd stood in this spot, making this choice. Some pressed the button, some didn't. Some did neither. 4 minutes. Emily turned away from the override panel and moved instead to the capsule itself. The quantum field parted around her like water, or maybe she was the water, flowing into spaces that physics said she shouldn't fit. The capsule's door was open, closed, opening a Schrödinger's hatch that existed in all states simultaneously. She reached inside and pulled out something that wasn't there yet. A photograph that would be taken in 1950, showing a message in her handwriting. She could feel the paper's texture through her radiation suit's gloves, impossible and real. 3 minutes. Through the observation window, she could see her team watching. Sarah crying, Marcus pacing, James calculating. They looked like ghosts already. Or maybe she was the ghost, a woman caught between moments, between choices, between the past that had already happened and the future that refused to change. 2 minutes. Emily placed the photograph back in the capsule that wasn't open, couldn't be open, had always been open. She understood now. The loop wasn't about the capsule. It had never been about the capsule. It was about the choice, the eternal, recursive choice to try to fix the past or accept the present. 1 minute. She made her choice. Emily hit neither abort nor confirm. Instead, she pulled the emergency release on her suit's chest plate, breaking the seal. Radiation flooded in, along with something else. Not death, but transformation. Not ending, but transition. The quantum field recognized her as part of itself now, a probability collapsing into certainty. The countdown hit 0. The world exploded into light. When the brilliance faded, the chamber was empty. The capsule was gone, launched into the past or dissolved into possibility. Emily's radiation suit lay crumpled on the floor, abandoned or never worn, depending on which timeline you chose to follow. Sarah was the first into the chamber, ignoring James's warnings about residual radiation. She found two things: the suit and a note, written in Emily's handwriting on paper that looked 70 years old. The paradox isn't in what we do. It's in believing we need to fix the past instead of healing the present. I made my choice. Make yours. EC. All years simultaneously. Marcus picked up a tablet from the floor, its screen cracked but still displaying Emily's final log entry. Temporal displacement confirmed. Destination, October 15th, 1950, but also January 1956, but also now. Time isn't a line or a loop. It's a choice we keep making. He read aloud quietly. James ran every scan, checked every reading. The capsule had launched successfully, arriving exactly when and where it was supposed to. The materials inside had vanished, but that was impossible because they'd been found in 1950, documented, photographed, unless they'd been added later. Unless... She's not gone, Sarah said quietly, holding the note. She's just distributed, across possibility. They found one last thing, tucked beneath the abandoned radiation suit. A photograph, newly old, showing Emily standing beside the capsule in 1950, her hair grayed despite her young face, her eyes carrying the weight of futures that hadn't happened yet. She was smiling. Behind her, barely visible, was another figure. Also Emily, younger or older, it was hard to tell. The timestamp on the photo read, "All moments, simultaneously." The laboratory's regular lighting flickered back on. The emergency was over, or had never happened, or was happening continuously in a loop that existed outside normal time. They stood in the empty chamber, three scientists contemplating a fourth who had become something between presence and absence, between mistake and correction. "So, what do we do now?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked at the note again, at her sister's words about healing the present. Outside, the world continued warming. Species continued vanishing. The future continued arriving 1 second at a time, unchanged by all their attempts to fix the past. "Now," she said, "we do the real work.